In nights where the golden thrones of Constantinople trembled with visceral dread, Byzantine sailors whispered a singular name that froze the very marrow within their fearful, trembling bones. These were no mere wandering corsairs, but an entire nation forged in injustice and cast into the salt, transforming the abyss into both a heavy shield and dagger. Their obsidian banners haunted the horizon long before hulls appeared, as pillars of smoke from incinerated villages announced an inevitable doom to shores paralyzed by a cold, frozen terror. Who were these iron-willed phantoms who carved a sovereign Islamic heart from a Greek jewel, defying the Byzantine Leviathan for 13 decades of unyielding defiance and constant humiliation? They were sons of al-Andalus, heirs to Cordoba and Seville, carrying the elegance of lost paradises alongside a relentless martial spirit that refused to acknowledge any final, crushing defeat. Before the Emirate ascended, there was only the ash of failed rebellion in Cordoba, where bloodied exiles chose to trade their wandering misery for a glorious, sovereign maritime conquest. Abu Hafs al-Andalusi braved the rolling tides, bearing the searing fires of exile within his chest and the crushing weight of a nation cast into the infinite blue salt. He knew not where the currents dragged his overcrowded vessels, yet his prideful soul whispered that destiny would be born from raw survival rather than ancient, dusty imperial maps. When Crete emerged from the mists, Abu Hafs envisioned a natural fortress and a strategic key to the Mediterranean, a bastion capable of shattering the global imperial power scales. The subsequent conquest was no mere raid, but the genesis of a state, forging a new identity where Andalusian nostalgia met the jagged, unyielding iron of total maritime supremacy. They christened their capital Chandax, the moat, carving a deep trench into the earth because their scarred hearts knew that only blood and stone could secure a home. Byzantine legions dispatched to purge these strangers returned broken and bewildered, unable to fathom how landless exiles could strike the Roman heart and leave it trembling and perpetually fearful. In the 9th century, the Byzantine giant stretched across vast horizons, but suffered from internal rot and the devastating weight of continuous wars against the rising Eastern Islamic powers. Crete remained the crown jewel of the Eastern Mediterranean, a brilliant strategic pivot controlling every maritime artery between the wealth of the East and the hungering dark European West. When Crete fell to Andalusian steel between 827 and 828, imperial strategists were paralyzed by a shock that decades of warfare could never truly erase or easily soothe. The mystery lay in Andalusian velocity and absolute audacity. They moved like a sudden storm, seizing the beaches before the drowsy Byzantine garrisons could even raise their first alarms. Geography served as their most loyal vanguard, for Crete's jagged coastlines and mountain ridges shielded the defenders while multiplying the bloody cost of any failed Imperial Roman counteroffensive. They fortified Chandax on the northern shore, where seasonal winds favored their predatory fleets while hindering any Roman armadas seeking vengeance against their newly established and sovereign island fortress. The Aegean Sea transformed into a hunting ground for these Cretan Andalusians as their black sails appeared from Marmara to Athens, haunting every coastline with an impending ruin. In 829, Admiral Orphanatrophos assembled a colossal fleet to reclaim the jewel, but Abu Hafs sent him retreating in bitter disgrace, a defeat omitted from many imperial songs. The recurring Byzantine error was underestimating these wanderers, viewing them as rootless brigands when they were actually a nation resolved to perish before surrendering their stolen sacred sanctuary. These people sought no salvation from distant caliphs in Baghdad or Cordoba, building their own self-sustaining might upon the logic of a besieged island and sharp-tempered steel. Generation by generation, the exiles' children inhaled the salt air, mastering the currents until they became the most formidable naval warriors the Mediterranean had ever witnessed before that age. Life revolved entirely around the sea, from the rhythmic hammering of shipyards to the rigorous training of marines, fueled by raids that sustained their defiant and isolated existence. These maritime raids were never random acts of piracy, but meticulously choreographed operations driven by sharp intelligence and an intimate understanding of the Mediterranean's complex and treacherous weather patterns. They struck during the gray dawn when sentinels were heaviest with sleep, utilizing the calm waters for rapid insertion before fading back into the deep and misty horizon. Their fleet eschewed the lumbering weight of Imperial dromons, favoring agile light vessels that danced upon the waves, outmaneuvering the heavy Roman machines through sheer and predatory speed. Flexibility was their primary weapon. They avoided open confrontations with the main Byzantine fleet, choosing instead a calculated war of attrition that bled the empire's maritime strength slowly. They navigated the Aegean labyrinth with the intimacy of predators, knowing every hidden cove and treacherous reef that could conceal a small flotilla from the blind Imperial Roman eyes. Aegina fell to their blades, its riches plundered, and people enslaved, bringing spoils to Chandax that stunned the locals while terrifying the emperor in his distant and gilded palace. From Thessaloniki to the Dardanelles, they struck with the speed of ghosts, appearing simultaneously in disparate locations until the Byzantines felt trapped within a recurring and waking nightmare. They developed a sophisticated intelligence network using merchants and sailors who traded secrets alongside silk, blending commerce and espionage into a singular and devastating instrument of sovereign survival. Monitoring every imperial movement from Constantinople to Athens, they anticipated invasions before ships were even manned, preparing their defenses while the Roman admirals were still debating their strategy. The fortress of Chandax was a masterpiece of defensive engineering, its deep trench and soaring walls overlooking both land and sea, manned by a garrison in perpetual, lethal readiness. Defense alone could not sustain them. Naval raids provided the economic lifeblood required to pay warriors and procure supplies from daring merchants who defied the imperial blockade's reach. When Admiral Theoctistos arrived in 843 with a massive armada, he found Chandax far more formidable than imagined, eventually retreating with meager spoils and a heavy, bitter burden. Psychological warfare was their shadow weapon, crafting a terrifying myth that they were invincible ghosts of the deep, a curse upon any Roman soul attempting to reclaim Crete. Byzantine sailors tasked with the invasion carried the crushing weight of these legends, fearing the Andalusian fleet that emerged from the abyss like divine punishment and then vanished. Faith served as the profound anchor binding these exiles against every storm, as their mosques and scholars transformed a conquered island into a vibrant pulse of Islamic civilization. Over 10 imperial expeditions were launched across 13 decades, yet each returned shattered against the unyielding rocks and the unshakable resolve of the sovereign and defiant Andalusian warriors. This failure was no accident but the logical consequence of military and geographical factors that the Andalusians mastered while the arrogant Roman commanders remained blinded by ancient vanity. Supplying a massive invasion fleet in the Aegean against a mobile enemy proved a logistical nightmare that maps in Constantinople could never accurately reflect or solve for imperial commanders. Andalusian leadership launched suicidal strikes against Byzantine supply lines before the main armada reached Crete, burning grain ships and imposing starvation upon the would-be besiegers themselves very early. The expedition of NIKEPHOROS Phocas the Elder in 902 yielded nothing but frustration despite his renowned genius, for the sea belonged to the sons of al-Andalus, not Rome. When fire ships armed with Greek fire attempted to incinerate the Andalusian fleet, the Cretans utilized massive iron chains to seal their harbor, an unprecedented tactical maneuver that succeeded. At its zenith, the Emirate commanded hundreds of vessels manned by sailors whose ancestry blended the ruggedness of mountains with the daring of the deep Mediterranean's unforgiving salt. The island birthed generations of warriors specialized in a singular craft, the war of the besieged, mastering the art of the lightning strike and the tactical vanishing withdrawal. In 911, the Emirate launched its boldest raid toward Thrace, striking near the imperial heart and returning with spoils that echoed through the streets of Constantinople with visceral dread. Byzantine councils were haunted by one agonizing question: how could a vast empire be humiliated by a band of exiles who possessed nothing but a single fortified sovereign island? This tormenting riddle broke the spirits of emperors like Romanos and Constantine VII, who watched their maritime sovereignty erode under the constant pressure of the unyielding Andalusian blades. The The true secret of their endurance was not merely stone walls, but a collective identity forged by people who had no other home to retreat to if finally defeated. A man possessing only what is in his hand fights with a ferocity unknown to those with vast estates behind them. The Andalusians fought with an absolute resolve. The Island of Terror, as Byzantine records secretly named it, extracted a staggering annual toll in blood and gold, accumulating like heavy winter snow upon the aging, weary empire. The Aegean, once a private Roman lake, became a contested arena between a land-based titan and a maritime phantom, marking a pivotal shift in the clash of civilizations. Then came the commander who dared to break the legend, a falcon-eyed general known for his cold, calculating ruthlessness and his refusal to accept anything less than total victory. In 960, NIKEPHOROS PHOCAS assembled a force unlike any before, creating a total war machine comprising combat fleets, supply armadas, and a massive disciplined army for the final landing. NIKEPHOROS understood that Crete could not be taken by a single blow, but through a methodical siege that strangled the island's resources and drained its will to resist further. The fleet he gathered was terrifying even to his own council, numbering nearly 4,000 vessels, a naval concentration unseen since the ancient golden days of the Greek empires. The amphibious landing at Mersin Bay in 961 remains a masterpiece of medieval warfare, as horses and armored infantry descended upon the shore in a perfectly synchronized, unstoppable wave. The Andalusians faced a commander who matched their ferocity, but possessed infinite resources, leading 27,000 disciplined troops who advanced with the crushing weight of a rising tide. Abdul-Aziz ibn Shweb, the final emir, led his remaining warriors beyond the walls for a final stand, preferring a glorious death in battle over the shame of chains. The struggle beneath the walls of Chandax was among history's most savage encounters, as exiles fought for their existence against the inevitable, crushing momentum of the Byzantine Imperial destiny. Chandax finally fell in the spring of 961, consumed by fire and blood, yet the Andalusians extracted a terrible price from the Roman legions before their final heroic end. Months later, NIKEPHOROS entered Constantinople in a triumph not seen for generations, an admission that conquering these exiles was a feat of extraordinary difficulty and immense imperial pride. Though the emirate vanished from the maps 33 years later, its legacy remained etched into the stones of the Mediterranean, a study in the absolute power of human will. 130 years of defiance against a superpower was not mere luck, but a redefinition of endurance born from shared memory, maritime genius, and an unshakable creed. Modern military academies studying asymmetric warfare still find the Andalusian experience standing as a testament to strategic resilience and the power of a small force against an empire. The first lesson is that exile does not extinguish the spirit. Rather, it tempers it into a weapon that refuses to recognize the possibility of any final, total defeat. Second, strategic geography acts as a force multiplier, allowing a smaller, disciplined force to hold the gates against an empire if they possess the mastery of the surrounding abyss. Third, a cohesive collective identity is the ultimate fortress. The Andalusians in Crete were not merely an army but a society sharing a singular, existential destiny against the world. Fourth, war is an economic engine. The emirate understood that maritime raids were the sustenance of their state, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of wealth and increasingly lethal power. What remains of the Islamic Emirate of Crete in our civilization's memory? It stands as proof that history is often written by the bold adventurers who dare the impossible. Abu Hafs al-Andalusi, who sailed into the unknown, would surely smile knowing his descendants defied the Roman titan for 13 decades, proving the immense capacity of a resolved soul. Today, the Aegean is tranquil, but those who know its bloodied history see the shadows of Andalusian galleys in every wave and hear the echoes of ancient, defiant iron. Crete remains Greek today, yet deep within its soil lie the foundations of an Andalusian dream that proved land is taken by will and the sea belongs to brave. This is the saga of exiles who lost a paradise to build a fortress, transforming their misery into a legend and proving that an inspired heart can never conquered.